listener production.
Hey, Katrina here with you. Well, I don't know about you, but to me, it feels like QAnon has gone very quiet. Should we be worried? I mean, I feel a bit like the parent of a teenager, and it is very quiet in that bedroom. QAnon first appeared in 2017, and it quickly flooded the internet with conspiracy theories from things like child trafficking, cannibal celebrities, to suggestions that JFK faked his own death and was returning to run for office. But observers say that now QAnon has gone strangely quiet. So it makes you wonder, what are they working on? Or has it just run its course? Mike Rothschild is a global expert on QAnon, and he joins us for the briefing now. Am I right? Has QAnon gone quiet?
Well, I think that what we perceive of as QAnon has definitely changed. You know, the initial version of QAnon, the one that I was tracking and a number of other people were tracking from late 2017 until the end of 2020, was based on, President Donald Trump enacting this great purge of the deep state that he would announce on Twitter. Well, Donald Trump is no longer president, has not been for quite some time. There haven't been any Q drops in quite a while. So by its very nature, the conspiracy theory around QAnon really had to change. But what's happened is that the tenets of QAnon, this idea of an all-powerful deep state, of the global elites, running these trafficking rings, of the election being the 2020 election in the US being a fraud, all of that is now mainstream conservatism. So one could say that the actual QAnon has really faded away, but the ideas of Q, in one sense, are really more popular than ever.
What about the figure who started all of this? Where are they at, and what are they saying?
The identity of the person who made the Q drops is still not 100% known. And there are a couple of names that are usually brought in as kind of reliable suspects for who did this. Usually it starts off with this South African web designer named Paul Ferber. He made the first few posts on 4chan. Q then jumped from 4chan to 8chan to a board on 8chan that Paul Ferber ran, where Q was posting for a while and then switched boards on 8chan, and then probably was taken over by the administrator of 8chan, who's Ron Watkins. And if you've seen the HBO documentary, Q Into the Storm, Ron Watkins is the guy who's at the end, kind of admits that it was him and then he doesn't. So it probably was some combination of those guys. And of course, at the end of the Trump administration, Ron Watkins starts posting on Twitter as a self-described voting machine expert, which he was not, and didn't really need Q anymore. So other than that brief return of Q in 2022, which was pretty certain to have been Jim Watkins, who's the owner of 8chan, Q has not needed to post anything. There's no real reason to make kind of cryptic pronouncements and riddles when you can just say whatever you want on Elon Musk's version of Twitter.
That is very true. So in the lead up to the 2020 election and in the wake of the January 6 riots, Q was seen on posters and flags and badges. It was pretty much front and center in the protests in the wake of Trump's election loss. Are we still seeing those slogans and emblems now?
You're not seeing it as much overtly, particularly at Trump rallies. The Secret Service actually started banning a lot of that stuff. But you're still getting a lot of the Trump retweets. He will share posts from Q believers on Truth Social quite a bit. People who are clearly QAnon believers, or if you dig in a little bit into their account history, they've posted Q stuff before. So Trump is clearly magnifying those things. And Trump's social media team is still using a lot of those images. They're still using a lot of the memes, a lot of the hashtags. They know how to pander to the QAnon crowd. And of course, that crowd adores Donald Trump as a kind of God King figure.
So you mentioned before that some of the earlier theories around, trafficking and the rigged election have become quite mainstream now. So what are the new ideas that we're seeing? What are some of those things that might not yet be mainstream?
Well, it's really difficult to tell what's bubbling up at the very bottom of the internet because a lot of that stuff gets shared very quickly on places like X, which now has no real moderation and has had the return of pretty much all of the major QAnon promoters. So the ideas that normally would pop up in very random places, very obscure places that most people didn't go to, places like 8chan, those are things that are being found much more on Twitter, posted by people who have, 200,000 followers, because there is no separation between the very base of the conservative conspiracy believer and the very top.
You mentioned, that particular moment in time when QAnon theories started to come to light and gain a following. Could it have only happened at that point in time? Was there sort of some magical aligning of the planets that perhaps, it couldn't or wouldn't happen today?
I think that the growth of QAnon, when it happened and based on the factors that went into it, was very particular to that time. Donald Trump really was the first conspiracy theorist president. You had all of these conspiracy theories about Obama and about George W. Bush and, of course, the Clintons. But you didn't have the people in office spreading them. Even other Republican presidents weren't spreading conspiracy theories about Democrats. You didn't have the Bushes spreading conspiracy theories about the Clintons. They tried to stay above all of this stuff. But then when you had Trump, he was elevated to political prominence because he believed that Barack Obama wasn't born in the United States. So he immediately brought with him as a constituency all of these people who believed all this stuff and had always been there on the far right, but they'd been restricted to militias, late night talk radio, hand-printed newsletters. But then in 2017, you have Trump as the president, you have the explosive growth of social media, and you have a very particular niche of people on 4chan who'd been supporting Trump with memes and conspiracy theories and trolling. And this is where QAnon started, but this was a very prime environment for these things to start. So it really was the right president at the right time with the right conspiracy theory being spread by the right people.
And given what's just recently happened with Donald Trump being convicted on 34 felony counts, what do you think is going to happen around all of that?
Oh, it's so hard to predict what's going to happen with all of that stuff. But one thing that I can tell you is that whatever happens with Trump, the conspiratorial part of his base is going to see it as a win. They see his conviction as a win. Oh, it means the deep state is so afraid of him, they had to come up with this fake trial and this rigged result by this crooked judge. If he'd been acquitted, of course, it would have been, the greatest victory in human history. Everything that happens gets pulled into the kind of the lattice work of the conspiracy. It all becomes part of the story. So anything that happens, it's not going to dispel any of this idea that Trump is this kind of magical 12-dimensional chess master. It all gets pulled into the story and it all gets used to further his goals.
So do you think we're in a post-QAnon era? Where are we at now? Where to next?
Well, I think that the QAnon that we were watching for a long time, that definitely has faded out. Although, who knows, maybe if Trump wins, Q will come back and we'll get to do all of this all over again, which is terrifying. But I think now we're at the point where conspiracism is so ingrained into mainstream conservatism, it doesn't need QAnon anymore. It doesn't need the riddles and the questions and the rhetorical nonsense. It just has Trump, and it has quite a few members of Congress who are willing to go on Fox News and cable TV and Twitter every day and share all of this stuff. It doesn't need to have that kind of specialness of a conspiracy theory that not a lot of people know about. It really needs to be as mainstream as possible to get the number of people that Trump needs to get him back into office.
Mike Rothschild, thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing.
Thank you.
That was Mike Rothschild, an expert on QAnon, whose new book, Jewish Space Lasers, what a cracker name, which is on the Rothschild family and 200 years of conspiracy theories and myths, is out now. Thank you for listening to today's briefing. Before you go, though, we would love it if you could share this episode with someone you think might enjoy it. And if you want to keep up with our other content, you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast and also on TikTok and YouTube. You just search for Listener Newsroom. I'm Katrina Blowers, and I will catch you next time.
listener.